now recording? Yeah, okay, we're recording now. And yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now and let you guys introduce.
Evan, do you want to go first?
Okay, great. Showing leadership qualities. Sure, cool. Hi, I'm Evan Dooley. That's what my name and Zoom says anyway. I was previous student rep at ASB and currently serve as a communications chair. A bit about my non-ASB background. I did my undergrad and graduate work at the University of Virginia in motion capture through to predictive simulations of whole body human movement with devices. I then went and spent a year in technical consulting at a company called Exponent, and I was out in Phoenix, though they have offices across the country. And then I came back to Charlottesville actually towards the end of last year to join a company here in town to do sports performance research. We also use biomechanics to inform testing devices, which is something we can talk more about because I know Kurt likes that. And along with sports performance, we also do a fair amount of injury tracking and mitigation for the NFL. So that's what I'm up to right now. And I will popcorn to Melissa to keep it rolling.
Okay, sounds good. I wasn't sure if we should share slides, but I can also just keep it brief.
No, feel free to share slides if you have them.
Okay, well, it's gonna end up being a little bit longer than I think. But I'll try to. I just requested sharing slides. But I will.
Yeah,
keep it pretty brief. So I went to the University of Akron for undergrad and studied biomedical engineering and started research there. And just bringing that up because other, I guess, industry experiences there that I found that I really enjoyed. One was working at Toyota in their crash test and safety computer simulation group. And then I also worked at Wake Forest, Virginia Tech. They have a biomechanics or bioengineering injury program. And so I also worked on simulations in that, as well as some experience at the University of Cape Town in South Africa and more like skin biomechanics and doing research. And I really enjoyed research, so I stayed on that path and then went to grad school for bioengineering at Stanford and really focused on digital tools for assessing biomechanics at a large scale and then how we can use movement data to predict health or other factors. I stayed as a postdoc there. I had developed a psychological intervention for people with osteoarthritis as I was also working on biomechanics. And so I ran a clinical trial with that. And am also with that currently, just started a company to commercialize that, which has been fun. Other roles, I worked on digital physical therapy platforms and other for specialized bicycles, working on projects with them, again, focusing on like digital tools to improve access to biomechanics. I was a student rep for the International Society of Biomechanics, which was an experience that I loved, working on Boom as well with Hanna, our biomechanics podcast, and National Biomechanics Day were just a few additional things I feel like in my career that I've loved and wanted to share. I'm currently the VP of Science and Research for the Joe Gibbs Human Performance Institute. So when I was finishing my postdoc, I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And I can share more about that, but I was interviewing for all sorts of things, like as a professor at startups, at bigger companies, and just really exploring and went through the interview process. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Still after that, I wasn't particularly like passionate about any of the opportunities. And then I got a random email from the guy on the top left here, Matt, from a NASCAR team. And I had initially ignored it because I didn't think I wanted to go into sports and like, especially motorsports. I had really no interest in motorsports as I'm sharing this at my work right now. But then hearing more about what they were building was this biomechanics lab to analyze. Initially, it was just built to analyze pit stops, which I'll share about. So we instrumented the ground with close to 100 force plates where they're embedded under the ground and a race car can drive into the lab and have all markerless tracking and other sensors And once we kind of engineered how to do that, they realized that you could use that for so many other things. So part of my role coming in was like figuring out how the lab can be used for other things like designing, also our research and development paths and things like that. Like to me, it's been really exciting too. The past year and a half, I've been working on developing this tool, and now that we're nearing the end of the development phase, how it can actually be used. And I have a short video here as well. Sorry if I'm taking up too much time. But yeah, we have all different sports now that you can see here. You can see like I'm really excited about the potential here and like collaborating with universities and doing research. So it's kind of this like in between, like, yes, it is industry, but at the same time, it is very applied. There is opportunity to do research, to work with universities. And so, yeah, I've had a lot of fun in this role and, yeah, excited to kind of see where it leads. So. And I'll just stop
That was
sharing.
amazing. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Thanks. Hannah, what or Kurt? Who wants? Hey, Hannah, do you want to go next?
Sure. Melissa, I'm always impressed with your graphics and slides and everything, and visuals and your story. And also, Evan, it's nice to see you. Kurt, I don't know you, but great to see you. And nice to see lots of familiar faces and names on the Zoom. Forgive me, I'm got a little bit of a cold, so my voice sounds like this, but I also have a couple quick slides that I'll just share. So I think I liked, Paula, you were really organized in helping us prepare for this. And you said, talk about where you are and how you got there. And I think if you take anything away from me ever, it's this. If you get the people right, nothing else matters. And I think that's really how I got to everywhere I got in my journey. And the other thing I'll attribute is failure is a lesson. Melissa and I love talking about failure on Boom. And so I'll talk a little bit about what my journey looked like on paper, but these things were really drivers and interspersed. So on paper, like I got my BS in biochemistry at Boston College, but I was like, oh wait, I don't really like biochemistry research my junior year. I hated being in the lab, but I loved the subject matter. And then I fell in love with the neuroscience and engineering, and I thought, if I want to do this, maybe that means I need to go go do more school. And so I was really lucky to have a professor that encouraged me to do that. And so I applied for graduate schools in bioengineering and was lucky to get into Stanford. And as soon as I got to Stanford, I realized, oh shoot, I don't know what I like, and I can't find a lab. It actually took me we rotate through different labs, and it took me 4 different rotations, so almost the full first year to figure out what lab I even wanted to join. And when I joined Stanford, I didn't even know what biomechanics was. I was really interested in the brain, and so it was really fun to meet people in both biomechanics and in neurology and neuroscience and kind of bridge those. So again, getting the people right. But there you can see our interspersed some sort of failures of not knowing what to do at different points. And so my PhD work was really uniting people with Parkinson's, measuring their biomechanics with wearables, and doing human-centered design to create therapies that help them walk better. Melissa mentioned Boom, our podcast, and it was really fun to do some science communication things as well in my PhD. Then I just add this line. I feel like when I was graduating, there was this like, what is academia? What is industry? Do I want to be a professor? Do I want to go to industry? And I think what's cool is what are popping up now are these are these research staff or research or non-tenure track sort of positions within academia, but that are still research, that are still teaching, that are still mentorship. And so that's what I do now. I am a scientific program manager with the WUSI Human Performance Alliance, which is an institute at Stanford and at 5 other institutes across the country, really dedicated to, instead of we often look at health from a standpoint of disease, trying to fix what's going wrong. And so at the Alliance, we're trying to flip that on its head and say, what can we learn from peak performance, and then apply that to all people to help them achieve their own peak performance. And so there's a specific focus on elevating the female athlete and their health and performance. And so I'm working on projects in that and can talk more about that later. And my role is really unique. It's really special. It's like a nice mix of getting to do my own research, getting to also teach both undergrad and graduate courses, and then mentor graduate students, postdocs, as well as work on some science communication and translation. So I feel really lucky that I've got to mix, as you can see, some of those different elements that I learned in my training in my current role. And I'm happy to talk more about that later. But thanks for letting me do that intro.
Thank you so much. Also, I think this was a little bit selfish, but also knowing that a lot of people know Boom and are huge fans. So having both of you was it's really awesome. Now going to Kurt.
Yeah, first of all, I'm just really pleased I get to be part of this panel. Like everyone on it is just has really, really cool work. So my name is Kurt Beschorner. I am not in industry. I am I might consider my career path to be a little bit of a reluctant academic. And so well, first of all, let me introduce myself. So I'm associate professor in bioengineering at the University of Pittsburgh. And then I am also the meeting chair for the 2025 ASB meeting. So I hope that you will join us in Pittsburgh in August. And so just a little bit about my background. I definitely never thought I wanted to go a career academic life. I did an internship in undergraduate and it was okay, but I didn't love it. And then so when I learned that graduate school was an option and that they would pay me to go to school, I said, all right, I'll do that, and then I'll go to industry. And then I did another internship during my PhD, which, by the way, if you have the opportunity to do, I would definitely recommend. And so that second internship, I was doing a lot of work at the intersection of like computational mechanics and biomechanics. And so I worked at ANSYS, which is an engineering software company. And then I didn't like that again. So then I was like, all right, well, maybe I just want to keep doing research like I have been doing. And I was fortunate to get, one opportunity. I came onto the job market in 2008, which was when the Great Recession is hitting. And I know I keep hearing from grad students that the job market isn't great this year. And it feels a little bit like that moment then too. And so I've been doing research, but I've tried to do it through a really applied lens. And basically every opportunity to work with industry that I've gotten, I've taken. And so I've done most of my work is on fall prevention, but not really looking at older adults, looking at sort of the populations that don't get a lot of attention. And so some of my work has involved ladder design and how that influences fall risk, and other parts have focused on footwear and how do you test footwear, and how should footwear be designed to prevent slip and fall accidents. And so one interesting thing about all that is, as an academic, you have an opportunity to do private consulting. So I also own a consulting company. Right now, I do some consulting. I have clients on artificial turf and construction supplies that are supposed to ease installation and reduce fall risk. So that's kind of a couple of clients I have there. But another thing that's been really interesting about doing like industry focused research from academia is right now the federal government funding situation is pretty dicey. And so And especially the work I do in occupational safety is real dicey. And so kind of the connections I have with industry has been sort of this lifeline, and where, you know, we're in the middle of the story, so I don't know how it's going to end, but it's looking promising that we might be able to kind of keep some of our work going by bringing in some private money. So yeah, so that's my quick intro.
Thank you so much for to the four of you. I have so many questions, but I'm gonna let first everyone else raise their hand or put it in the group in the chat if you have any questions. Okay, I guess I will go first then. So I think one of the things, at least that I'm concerned, or I heard from students, is this fear of if you go into industry, you're not as intellectually free. It sounds that well, Hanna, you mentioned that you have this ability still to come up with your own research, or I guess one question for each of you is, do you see in your work that you can still, your voice is heard and like your ideas and like the way that you want to direct your research? Is that something flexible that you can do, or how does that work in your areas?
I guess I'll clarify that I'm not in industry. Like I work at a research institute as part of Stanford, or that's at Stanford. But I think maybe it sounds like Evan, Kurt, and Melissa all have some nice industry experiences, so maybe you can comment on.
I'm happy to jump in. I would sort of pose the question back, because I had heard this in grad school as well as one of the reasons against, and maybe Kurt even just pointed out, you're not entirely free academically in being an academic. My experience has been in both cases, you're free to research whatever you can get paid to research. So the communicating it and the storytelling becomes critically important so that you can convince either internally at the company you work for or grant agencies or university agencies that fund your academic research that that's worth paying for. Has been my experience. I think it also depends what your role is at the giving company. It sounds like maybe Melissa has a lot of freedom and direction, being in charge of the research. And right when I was a consultant, I was at a much bigger consulting company. It didn't have my name on it like Dr. Beschorner's does. But in that case, it was pretty much you were hired to be the expert in that field, and they would have things come through that needed experts in that area. And so you would work on those projects as they came through, and there's not a lot of picking. My understanding is if you wanted to stay there for a long time, you would move up through the ranks, and then it would become your job to go find new business that needed those experts. And so in that sense, you would be able to like direct a little bit based on which clients you were recruiting to be in the business, or like to be clients of yours. You would know what sorts of research and things they would need, and you could direct it that way. And yeah, so in my current role, the second question of do you feel your voice is heard? I think very much so, yes. I'm lucky in that way. And part of what they hired me for was, as we move from a more injury focused space to injury and performance, that includes going up the scale to the whole body and looking more at things like energetics and stuff like that. And so that's right, more of my background. And there aren't as many people at my current job, which I don't know if I actually said out loud or not. It's BioCore. It's not a secret. No one told me I couldn't tell you. That's where I work. And so, right, as we do some of that, like, yes, my voice is heard. That's part of why they hired me, right? Part of going to grad school and getting letters after your name is you are now an expert in that thing that you got your dissertation in, and hopefully a couple things nearby. So it makes you more valuable. That's what they're trying to hire you for, is my take.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Evan. I think, yeah, I think a lot of that is true. And I, especially like the first part kind of resonated because as I was doing faculty interviews, it was interesting because I was presenting the research that I wanted to do, but then each department would share their direction they were moving in their research. So it almost was like my research had to then kind of be tailored to that. And then it was interesting to hear the questions that I got about my research, like, oh, could you do this with it? Could you do that with it? And that's when I realized like, oh, these aren't the right positions for me because I actually don't like those ideas. Like I'm not as excited about those ideas. So that was a really helpful way for me to figure out what I wanted to do next was because I loved writing the like the job statements and letters and ideas for where my research could go. But then in reality, that wasn't where it was like shifted a little bit based on the goals of that school or department. And the same thing with industry. I feel really lucky in the position that I'm in now and that we are kind of a startup and it's like a research startup. But there are obviously limitations that, we have to start making money to be sustainable so we can all have a job in the future. So like it's this balance of we have to give like actionable, helpful things to clients. And so we're learning like what that looks like. And a lot of times there's a ton of research and development that goes into that. Then there have been times where I want to do research on a certain population. Like we had wheelchair basketball athletes in, or some of the female athletes that have come in, or really obscure sports that I find really interesting. Like we had ballerinas come in, and those athletes don't necessarily have the same type of funding situation as, say, like an NBA team or like NFL team or something like that. So recently we started a nonprofit foundation. And now I am really excited because I'm like overseeing that and can apply to grants where we can be like, okay, now we can actually generate some research questions that we want to answer, bring in different populations, and it's been really fun to. And I feel like I've had a lot of freedom and creativity to like be able to find this space where I can do research that I find is interesting and it's adding value to our company. And I think I had to find a way to show that it does bring value, if that makes sense. So if you're able to do that and be creative in that, then I feel like, and same with like in academia, right? Like, and I think a lot of it is like you apply to as many grants as you can at first, right? And then, but the ones that get funded kind of drive the direction of your research. Same here, whatever clients we are ending up with and funding we're getting is also kind of driving the direction.
Yeah, I thought there were some just like really interesting points about like team size and how that influences like the balance between, like I must think of these two things on different ends of the spectrum of like, how much, I don't know if control is the right word, but how much input you get on what the team does. And then on the other side is impact. And so if you're in a smaller team, you might end up with a smaller amount of impact, but sort of like more discretion over what that team is doing. Whereas on the other side, if you're working on a big team, you might be working on something that has big impact, like a product that's actually people are using at scale, and so any change you're making is affecting lots and lots of people, but maybe it's you don't have as much input on it, and so I was thinking about that, and academia tends to have smaller teams, but not always. And industry tends to have larger teams, but not always. And so I wonder if that's sort of has some bearing on how people think about the amount of intellectual freedom you have in each of them.
Thank you. That was awesome answers. We have a question in the group chat. It says, "Hi everyone, with your positions, how much of your time is dedicated to performing research versus developing research questions, objectives, or is it a mix of both? Thank you for your time.
Want to make a joke about time cards, but I'm not sure grad students would get it. In both my roles, my time has been tracked reasonably closely. So you like have to tell them at the end of every day, or by the end of every 2 weeks, if you would like to get paid, like how many hours you spent doing what things. So I probably actually have a reasonable idea. I do think it's being new and still, sort of not quite entry level, because there are also engineers at my job, is probably more research and less questions objectives at the moment, is probably somewhere between 70, 30, 60, 40 would be my best guess. Right. And some of that has to do with what Kurt just said about the team size. And so the team is smaller here than at my first job. And so I have more say in some of those questions and brainstorming sessions than I would at my last job. So yeah, I would say it's more research than questions at the moment.
So when we first started, there was only 3 of us. So I worked on like everything from like, trying to install hardware and actually collecting the data, to like helping develop some of the pipeline and do research and generate reports to athletes. So it was like kind of part of like doing work in this entire process. Now we've started filling in people to do different parts of that process. And actually was just having a conversation with our executive director, because it feels like I'm at a little bit of a fork now, where I'm trying to do both the doing and the planning, and now trying to feeling like I maybe need to like pick one of those a little bit more, and like whether and I learned this in industry too, like there's sort of like the technical leader, and then maybe more of like the strategic leader, or manager. And this is also how it was worded at Toyota and some other places that I worked at. I'm finding that I find a lot of joy in the planning and like the big picture and connecting all different people, and figuring out how to take a big problem and who's could solve what and how it would have an impact, and those types of questions like I really love. So my work has kind of started pivoting more towards that. And although like earlier I was also coding and working on research, but I think it's starting to transition to a little bit more of that. But I think it takes a lot of like figuring out what you love and like having experiences with both to like figure out, what is bringing you joy, and, how you can work more of that in, and how that fits in with your company as well. Like a lot of mine too has been like figuring out where I can bring value, inserting myself into those places too. And that's also created some different paths for me that I wasn't expecting.
I think some of that's even patience, right? Like you have to spend a little bit of time actually doing the thing to decide what you like and don't like about it. So it's okay. Things take time. You're not ahead or behind. And you can get a new job. I'm an example of that. You don't have to pick 100% correct right out of the gate. And I'm pretty sure you could still go back and get a faculty job if you wanted to. So, sorry, me, or anybody, right? That was a plural you.
I'm gonna move on to the next question because we have 2 more, so we can make sure we cover everything. But next question is, are there any skills or qualities that you think are important for industry roles that aren't typically developed or developed enough during a PhD?
I'm going to start because I was formerly our professional development person for our department. And I would say that, and I think this sort of like relates to the next question too, that I think PhDs have all kinds of skills that they undermarket commonly, not all the time, but commonly undermarket when they're interviewing and when they're talking with people. And I think, you know, the skill set people get from a PhD is not like, you know, being an expert in ligaments or whatever it happens to be. It's, you know, being able to teach yourself something new and really go to the edge of human knowledge with it and be able to, like, you know, learn lots of stuff about it and then use kind of that, evaluate and use that knowledge at sort of the edge of human knowledge. But then there's all these other skills you learn too. You learn project management, you learn statistics, you learn, you know, experimental design, all these things that are applicable in all kinds of ways. And so, you know, I would say the things that I think PhD students should learn more are networking skills. That comes up every single industry panel I've ever had. Networking skills always comes up. And you know, maybe, yeah, maybe I'm going to take my own advice, maybe kind of, you know, when to listen and when not to keep opining. So on that, I'm going to stop.
I went to a recent conference and there was someone in a business school or a professor from a business school talking about successful leaders and or successful people. And I really liked her framework. She said people who are successful do three things well: people, ideas, and execution. So relationships with other people, how good are your ideas or your vision, and then how well do you actually get things done? And I think that applies across the board, whether you're leading or you're contributing or whatever role you're in. And I feel like in a PhD, you get really good at ideas and execution, but maybe less good at the people side of things. And that's something I think that I mean, I think I thought I was good at people or thought I've been good at people at different points in my life, but in post PhD life where you're not just working on your own project and you are often working across teams, I think you really learn to negotiate those relationships and also figure out or navigate rather those relationships and how to negotiate and how to also just keep other people informed of what you're doing. Often in a PhD, you kind of like go into a hole, you're there for 4 months till you have to give lab meeting, and then you tell everyone what you're doing at lab meeting. But often, I think in these other settings, you're kind of having to keep weekly timelines. Evan, you were talking about having to keep people updated bi-weekly on what you're doing in order to get paid. So I think learning how to do that and communicate across different personality types and things like that is also important.
Yeah, I like that really resonates with me. I feel like a lot of project, like it sounds so boring, but like project planning and organization and being able to handle multiple tasks at one time and be accountable for multiple tasks. And like Hannah said, being able to communicate your progress, your blockers, things like that are all, and like at the appropriate time, like all of those are super important. And on the people side, you know, there's learning how to, you know, we all have our dynamics with our advisors, but like there is this like managing up. And for me, like I've never managed anyone before. And so over the past like year and a half, that's been a wild journey of learning how to manage other people and help other people grow. And you know, everybody is so different, and the way you need to communicate with everybody is so different. So that's been yeah, I don't know if there are ways I think to learn that a little bit more during my PhD. I think that could have been helpful. And then the other thing that I have found with really like successful employees or interns are those who have like taken a project all the way through fruition, if that makes sense, like all the way from the beginning to like actually showing like this is the end like product. I would say like product, but like being able to show in some way, like tangibly, a project is I think, an incredible like process to go through and like skill to gain. And I find that those who have like gone through that, not only like I see this question for like advice on application, like to me, having somebody that has like a portfolio that has like a real example of a project that they've done, and versus like, kind of like written in a resume, a project that they worked on, is like really powerful in my opinion.
And I think it maybe that ties into it. I was surprised that Melissa and Hannah didn't say it, probably because it's so ingrained. Communication, and specifically science communication, the technical, like the ability to translate your technical knowledge or that thing that you just learned overnight, as Kurt mentioned, right, to a wide audience, right? Because you don't know who's going to be on that, right? You either have a diverse team or you have to present to somebody above you because you're trying to get it funded, right? Being able to succinctly communicate the technical side in a lot of different ways is really helpful. And I think that part of that showing completion on a project, right, is just, it doesn't need to be your entire dissertation. It can be what's the actionable part out of one chapter or what you did last week, right? And so practicing it at things that are low stakes, like your lab meeting, right? Maybe it's an update, maybe you're still only halfway through fixing the problem, but like, what did you learn from it is an actionable result to me, right? And so just showing that you're thinking about it or remembering that this is like all part of a larger project. And so where does your piece fit into that vision, whether the vision is yours or not, right? So being able to communicate that so everybody sort of keeps following is, I think, pretty critical. And it's not that we don't have opportunities as grad students to do it. It's that it's, in my experience, it's never framed in that way because you're presenting to your own lab or the lab that's right next door to you, or you go to ASB and everybody does biomechanics, right? So there's some amount of, we all started here and we're like nodding through, yeah, you had that many cameras, we don't care, right? And so it's, but like that's not true necessarily when you start going outside or you start going to other departments that aren't at your university. So just, right, 3-minute thesis is a reasonable example that takes it almost to the extreme, but sort of that's that 90-second elevator pitch is critical.
Yeah, you can practice that by going to other seminars and things like that. That's usually my go-to, is like shake it up, get out of your field.
Yeah, or if your mech department has other things, I know when I would present and it's mostly like thermal guys, okay, they're like, we like lasers. Like, so this is your knee, and we start there, right?
Great. Moving to another question. How far close to graduation it's good to start applying for different positions?
Oh gosh, that's a good one. I had a wild ride with this one. One job I was looking at was a job I thought would be really cool. So I figured I'd throw my hat in the ring and found out that that company hires on a 4 to 6 week timeline. So wasn't going to work because I was still probably 8 to 10 months from graduation. But right, like the recruiter literally in that interview was like, but this is good to know, like you're out there and interested. So if something comes by and you think it fits, it's on them to tell you that you're not going to be there soon enough. It's not on you to try and guess when they need you to be there. And interviewing generally is a good experience. If it does specifically say, like in the job thing, like we need you to start February 26, and you know that that's never going to happen. Like some of those, but most of them don't say that. But like the next thing I interviewed for, or when I even got the technical consulting job at Exponent, they hire on a like 6 month or more timeline, right? So you could start in 4 weeks if you want to, probably, but also like they're hiring 6 months out. I'm totally happy to do that. So it really runs the gamut, is what I've seen. And probably has something to do again with Kurt's thing about the size of the team. if it's a small team and they've found the gap and they need that person sooner than later, they need the person sooner than later. If it's a bigger team and they generally know who they're going to need over a longer time horizon, they probably have more wiggle room.
Yeah, I feel like with my company, it's just like all over the place. So I don't want to give advice specific to our company, but I would say it also just doesn't hurt to just have conversations with people that you're like companies that you're interested in talking to, even if they're not hiring, and even if you're not ready to apply. Like for me, I feel like I've had, a lot of people that I just have a conversation with, and then they're in the back of my mind, like if we form this partnership or if this opportunity showed up, like, yeah, we might not have that position now, but like they're knowing that there, are people to potentially fill that role when it becomes available, or knowing that they graduate in the fall. And I'm like, okay, it's cool that I have like a buffer to figure out, where we're heading in certain areas. Like, um, yeah, so I wouldn't even wait until, there, or like assume that you can't apply just because there isn't an application too.
Yeah. My friend called it pre-interviewing, I think, or like, I'm not even sure it's that specific, but she's reached out to a couple people I know, and right, like it's the networking thing. I think Kurt had mentioned it, right? I know a couple people have even gotten a hold of me and we've just chatted for an hour, and I don't have hiring abilities. I might know if we have an open position coming up, but I also might not, and we could have one that's about to open up. So, right, doing this network, both as Melissa said, so that those people might then know that somebody is out there, and she's not the first person I've heard that from. And but also just like learning about who's around and what you could do there and what that might actually look like, right? Because I think it was also Melissa that pointed out that like as you start doing it, you'll figure out what you don't like about jobs, and you might get that from a pre-interview, and that saves you the hassle of trying to write a cover letter. So
Yeah, I love Melissa's point of just, being able to have those conversations. And we have someone in our department who tells our industry-oriented grad students that you don't want to wait till you're thirsty to start digging the well. Which I think is great. And like I think, there's different ways you can use like job listings, and one of them, the most obvious, is to apply for them and try and get the job. But the other ways you can use those, especially if you're not on the market yet, is just to understand the kinds of jobs that are out there and the people that you should be reaching out to and networking with. Like if you see a company has a really cool job and you're not ready for it, it's probably still worth finding someone at that company to have, like what Evan said, an informational interview with. Yeah, those are good points.
yeah, there was a question about advice or how to find those or where to look. One of them is attending this panel, so you've clearly already checked that box. I do think LinkedIn has picked up, even in the biomechanics space. And so reaching out to people on there, dropping a note, um, or asking whoever your mutual connection is to like send an email and introduce you to them off of LinkedIn, um, is a reasonable one. I know if I see a name go by that I recognize, I'm way more likely to open it. Um, and then if you haven't heard of Biomech L yet, um, ISB does a really nice job maintaining a forum that people do actively use, especially industry people. Um, yeah, there we go. Kurt's already got it. And so that one does get updated pretty regularly. I know I've seen some stuff on there and have had friends that had success through there.
Yeah, their conferences. I like one I went to recently was a Women in Data Science conference, and that was a fantastic one for networking that also really highlighted younger, or like, yeah, those looking for jobs. And also, like even in our city, like in Charlotte, we have like dinners for different yeah, I go to like a sports analytics, and it's not really, I'm not in sports analytics really, but it helps me like network within, sports and stuff. So because I'm new to sports, so I'm trying to meet new people that way. But there are also just kind of community groups or things like that. But then I would also really advise like putting yourself out there. So um, our executive director who hired me, he found me through YouTube video that I posted of a talk that I gave for ISB a few years ago that somebody had sent him. So, and that was something that I like took the time to record again myself and post it and share it. And I think those are things too that just get yourself out there and kind of have a presence. And I'm not like a huge social media person, but I think it's a good time to try to put yourself out there a bit when you're looking for a job in ways that like showcase your skills and your ideas.
Yeah, and with that, I know a lot of people started developing their own websites. I know that seems to go in waves. Google Sites, I think it is, works the same way as Google Slides. So if you've done any Google Drive, but that's a handy place. I know I put one together because sort of like, right, it's hard to show a biomechanics portfolio like in the way you would think of an architecture portfolio or something, but it is right like a website. You can write about things, you can practice writing for a diverse audience. I know my career center at UVA, even like they found it when I sent them an email that said I was looking, and they were like, you could be even more colloquial on this. And I was like, okay, maybe not, but right. And that allows right employers to look at it and they get a little bit more like personality as well as, depth and skills, and you can talk about whatever you want. Maybe think about it if your parents are going to see it, right? This is the professional side of it, so within reason.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I chose the four of you is that I had the impression that all of you were really passionate about what you're doing. And I think Melissa even mentioned this, that Anchor, that you're always driven, really trying to find whatever, like what fits you and the place that you're happy and like being driven by that. So I would love if you can maybe share if you actually agree that why it's important to choose something that you're passionate about and not just find maybe like the first biomechanics job, like an industry that opens up, and why maybe like being a little bit more picky and really trying to find the right fit for you.
I was actually going to say that in response to our discussion. Like, you can do all this, like, looking for jobs that pop up, and it's super important to keep yourself open, I think, to those things. But there's also some alignment with, like, what is exciting to you, what is moving for you. And it could be just in this moment. You don't have to be picking your job for the rest of your career, but just what is the next right step for you in this moment. And I talked about the people, ideas, execution thing that I learned at a recent conference. Another key takeaway from that conference was talking about how the speaker spoke of an area of transcendence. So where you really like sort of hit your flow state in your life and career is where your core values, your skills or aptitudes, and then what's economically viable for you all intersect. And she has some interesting, I think her book just came out. It's called Becoming You, which may be a little bit, it's not very biomechanics, but is sort of in this direction of like what is right for you in this moment. And I think has some tools on how to kind of find the intersection of those three things. So I think there's a little bit of always like, the soul searching, figuring out what's good for you, and then being open to the different opportunities and kind of creating your own luck in that way, and making sure you're exposed to those different opportunities.
I like that. I often use the analogy of like your umbrella of interests. Like you shouldn't just have one interest or one career. Like that's setting you up for disappointment. You should have sort of a range. And you know, when I interview, I can tell like there's two extremes that you want to avoid. One is where a student will say, I'll do anything. And it's like, come on, like there's got to be something that's more interesting to you than the other. And then the other extreme is where somebody has something very specific that they want to do, which is probably not what the job is going to be. And so kind of like defining that umbrella for yourself. Um, oh yeah, your career as a prototype. Is this designing your life?
It is a little, yeah, design your life. Exactly.
We're getting all a little Stanford heavy, but I like it. No. Actually, I recommend this to because I'm also our graduate program coordinator. I recommend this to a lot of grad students. And one of the things I love about that book is it tells you like, okay, people are usually good at this first one. Think of your dream job and identify that. And then the next thing they say is, all right, imagine that job no longer exists at all. And like, what would you do next? Which I think is a really cool exercise to kind of broaden out like what you want to think about.
And so I'm only like a year and a half, maybe a little bit more than that, out from graduation. And this is my second job. So, right, it's okay if those things change, right? Like if the weights change, in sort of the three buckets I think Hannah was talking about, or I think that's reasonably accurate, right? It's sort of, what what are you good at? What are you want to do or willing to do? And then like, is it economically viable? And I feel like sometimes we like disregard that third bucket, just sort of assuming that it's like we're doing grad school, it's all going to be fine. And in my like personal case, that wasn't like that was an important thing at the end of grad school. And even just being able to finish grad school, right, needed in my case with my advisor situation ship that we all have on varying degrees, like there needed to be something at the end that made that a hard and fast deadline. And so I found a job that was going to do that and meet enough of the other bins that I was willing to take it, right? And then once I was in that role, I learned a lot. There are a lot of awesome, cool people that I worked with and for while I was there. And I learned a ton about how the world works. They were also paying me enough that I could move across the country and I could get started there and figure things out. And sort of then being, more stable in that third bin let me start to reevaluate the other two and think about what am I really interested in? What would I want to be involved in longer term? Where even in the country would I want to be longer term and things like that, right? And so it's okay if those things change based on really anything, but like where they are, and it might even be good to sort of reevaluate those as you move through space and time. Yeah. So,
Yeah, yeah. I I agree with everything that everyone's been saying, and I feel really lucky that on most days I, really love my job and am quite passionate about it. But I think there's like although one of the things Kurt said with having many interests, I think that also includes outside of work. So I feel like it's also having a well-balanced life, and that's something that after grad school I've had to really learn how to set better boundaries, and also when you have now people evaluating you in different ways. It like added this additional, and people are counting on you in your work, and your work is being used in ways that it hasn't before. And that I think added a lot of pressure, and that I've been trying to figure out how to, manage that part of the job as well. But I think a big part of finding, my passion here is also like finding, I kind of mentioned this before, but it is like also finding gaps and like holes in my work, and knowing when like my skill set complements that and I can fill that, and then it's like kind of crafted my own way there. And so I think also just like having the ability to like recognize when your team could use something, and you can go beyond your, this assigned tasks to you, and put yourself out there in different ways that can help your team, and you also enjoy that. It can help you, I think, find the things that you love more, and then find that sort of ideal position. Like, that ideal position might not be the initial like job description that's laid out for you, but if you're able to creatively find ways that like add value to the team, and it's doing things that you love, like, that really is the sweet spot to be in. And sometimes it just takes time and being creative and putting yourself out there. But I will add, it's not every day that it feels like that. But you have to enjoy the good days, and get through the other ones.
Yeah. I know we're getting close to the end of time, and we might have missed one about seeing industry jobs hiring mainly PhDs or in the future, or seeing positions looking for advanced degree to get filled by masters instead. I don't know if anybody else has a better answer for that. I'm certainly seeing jobs for PhDs out there. I very rarely see ones that like you couldn't, if you had a PhD, you couldn't apply for it, even if maybe they're listing the qualifications as masters. And I don't think I've seen ones where a master's would fill the description if they specifically list a PhD. Sometimes they do, and the ones I've seen they specifically list will say PhD or like master's +5 or like master's +3, which is the like, well, you've gone out into industry and run a whole project by yourself. And so they think, they're in their role that they're saying that that's an equivalency. So that's been my experience with that one, just to not skip over things. Sorry.
If I can have 30 seconds to pitch things at the ASB meeting that might be relevant to our conversation. I put in the chat, there is a job poster fair at the meeting. It tends to be a little bit more academic focused, but we're trying to move it so that it serves industry too. And then the other thing is that we're going to have this amazing workshop on networking by Vani Sundaram. I'm going to put that in the chat too. So those are the things to check out, I would say, relevant to this conversation.
Yes, I will share a lot of notes with the students after. I took awesome notes, so I want to thank so much the four of you to taking this time. I think this is amazing for all of the students, and I will make sure to share everything with all the ASB students. So thank you so much again.
Awesome. Thank you. Good to see you all.
All a great job organizing.
Thank
Nice.
you.
Nice to meet you, Kurt. Nice to see you, Evan, Melissa, and everyone else.
Yeah, you too.
They're
Nice to
already-
meet you.
Yeah. Paula, I think Hannah put hers in the chat as well. People have started logging off. You're welcome to share my email if people have that, or they can find me on LinkedIn. If you send me a note, I might know that this is where I met you from. So
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna stop recording now.
Bye.
Bye, Hannah. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Hey, everyone.
sorry I missed the boat on having slides. Totally, if that went by,
No,
just didn't
maybe that was
see
my
it.
fault. Maybe I shared it with some people, and I know I did it for sure with Hannah and Melissa. Sorry,
Okay,
that might
okay.
have
Oh,
been my
sorry, I
fault.
don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I assume for them to be better at the slides than me, for sure, based on knowing them a little while. But I was like, I could have made a slide, maybe.
Would have crushed a slide.
I literally opened up and was like, I think I had to say like where I came from in my last interview, and it was like not close enough to just be like, here's a slide.
I do this thing where I schedule emails to myself, and I like just happened to schedule the email from Paula as like a reminder today, and I was like, oh shoot, she said make a slide. So
I did search it like 10 minutes before the meeting started, and I just had the ones that were like, Hannah and Melissa said they'd do it. Like, which day are we doing it? And I was like, okay, cool. Like, let me get some notes so I don't ramble too far without slides.
Sorry, I'm gonna put the excuse that this was finals week, and I'm also
Oh
a
no,
student, so but
no, you've this was
that
great.
was
You
my
made it
fault.
happen. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Awesome.
it matters is the message. So I think that was still awesome. Both Evan, you Evan and Kurt, it's great. I think we still got the message.
Marty,
Awesome.
thanks for having your camera on too. It was nice to see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anna.
Had some
I didn't get
positive
to ask my
nodding.
questions, but I was letting everyone else participate. But
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
do you
Marty
have one
and
now,
as
or-
all our awesome student committee members, they're also helping me with the World Congress of Biomechanics. Yeah,
Awesome.
I can always count on them. So thank you both for being here and yeah, sharing their faces. I think it really makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for arranging this. That was great to hear your different experience, and yeah, that was amazing. Oh yeah, thank you. Okay, have a good one.
Awesome.
Bye.
Well,
Bye.
welcome to send more questions along. Um, I probably have a couple minutes if you want to ask them, but Paula has things to do. So
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna
great.
hop on a meeting,
Goodbye.
but
Yep.
bye.
Best of luck.